I'm Ashley Shoniff, and I'm on a mission to keep heirlooms around for another generation. Inspired by the nostalgia of my own childhood, we're celebrating all the things our grandparents' generation loved to do. Join me as I go off the beaten path to explore small towns, pick through vintage markets, learn to do things the hard way straight from artisans and craftsmen, and knock through my stack of splattered family recipe cards to learn the nuances of a pinch and a dash so that I can recreate these special memories for my own family. So today I'm headed out to Scott's Antique Market. It's one of the largest antique shows we have here in Atlanta every month, and I'm going to meet with John, who is an avid collector of cast iron. He is going to teach me a little bit more about vintage cast iron, some of the makers, some of the marks, and I'm going to pick out a pan of my very own. So y'all come with me.
My wife and I have always done antiques. We've been married, it'll be 40 years this month. And we've always had antique booths around. And several years ago, we started accumulating cast iron. And it's just kind of sat around. And I never did anything with it. And a guy comes in and he goes, you got some really cool cast iron. If you cleaned it, you'd get a lot more money for it. And I'm like, well, how do you do that? And so that started a 2-year process, full-time, of developing a technique to clean cast iron. And my business is, I buy a lot of cast iron and then I clean it and season it, and people are always going, well, it looks like it's new. Well, I keep seasoning it until it looks like that. It doesn't just happen in one coat. Some of them are 3 times, some of them are 13 or 14 times. And some pieces never look right.
So how many foundries were there?
There were 57, supposedly. Most of them didn't mark their stuff, but there were like 57 foundries originally in the country.
So this is Birmingham, Alabama?
Yep, Birmingham Stove & Range, Birmingham, Alabama.
All right, so what about well, show me a couple of the other makers too. So that was Erie.
That's Erie, that's Griswold.
Ones, maybe.
Okay, that's the same company, and they had a, they always called them Eries, okay? Wagner called theirs Nationals. There was another company called Sydney Hollowware, which was also in Sydney, Ohio. They called theirs Sydneys.
And that was Wagner too?
No, it was Sydney Hollowware. But what happened, Griswold called their pans Eries. Sydney Hollowware owned the rights to the name Sydney, which was for Sydney, Ohio. Well, Wagner bought them out in 1897 so they could use the Sydney name like the Erie name. Well, Griswold was like, okay. So they started going with Griswold's Erie, and then they started calling them just Griswold's. This was 1905, 1906, they made this where they had Griswold's Erie. And then all of a sudden it went to Griswold's, but the numbering, see it's a number 710, that's the number you'd order them. If you at a store and you were ordering, you'd order a bunch of 710s.
Like a product number?
Yeah.
And then the 8 or the 7 is the size.
Right, and then it's 704.
And that's the product. So what is the N or the C?
It's a mold number. And this was used to identify who made it. So when it came through production, these guys were paid by the piece. So when these came through quality control, check marks would be put by people's names because they'd know who was using which molds that day.
And that's how they paid them?
Yeah, they got paid by the piece. And then so you got Griswold, you've got Wagner, and then you've got a company called Wapak. Wapak was in Wapak, Onetta, Ohio. Now if you notice, up here you can see E-R-I-E.
Yeah, very faintly.
And then you see the 716. Okay, well you look at this. This is a 716. That's Griswold's number for their number 10 pan. It's a 716. Well, they used an Erie number 10 pan to make their mold. And they just copied it. And this is called a sand shift. You can see in the sand, like when you do a sand castle, you have little waves and little creases in the sand. That's what those are. That's creases in the sand.
So I guess in the mold, when they put the sand in there, they just tried to make it as level as it could be.
Right, they packed it as hard as they could, but they'd have little gaps in it and you could see the little sand shift. But this is actually They used an Erie pan to make their mold. This was Wapaco, Netta, Ohio. But favorite pickleware, they're in Piqua, Ohio, okay? You got Wapaco, Netta, Ohio, and then the Wagner was in Sydney, Ohio. There are 3 consecutive exits on the interstate.
Oh, cool. So is there anything there now still? Are there, none of them are
The
producing?
towns are there,
Yeah.
but the foundries, the guys in Washington bought all the stuff. And this is a double skillet. They called it a 4-in-1.
Because it comes together?
It's 4 things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a chicken fryer. It's a skillet. Okay. It's a Dutch oven.
Yep.
And it's a cover. Now, why they call that the 4th use, okay? I think
gotta get it in there
I think it's a husband tamer. You know, the 4th use would be as like a weapon, right? Okay? But and then it's cool because it's hinged and it stands up.
Yeah, I
like
didn't know
that.
it was hinged. That is cool. And what's the I've never seen the star.
When you see a star on a piece of cast iron, like a teapot on the lid, that's Lodge. And then, you know, they made things like this. This is Griswold. This is a cake mold. So you'd pour your batter in one side and then the air holes, and then it would rise and it would make the cake.
For that very special cake. Early American. That is so cool.
This is a Wagner Ware 13. You know, it's really rarer than a Griswold 13.
It's huge. And I guess nobody makes one that big right now.
No. The biggest the new guys make is a number 10, and it's $400. And it's about 11.5 inches, and it's $400. Now, why would you want to buy that when you can buy one from me for $100 that's 100 years old?
With a story.
And
Totally
history
agree.
to it.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to something new. It's cast iron. You know, it doesn't go bad.
Yep.
It lasts forever. I'd just buy the old stuff if it was me.
So today I'm back in the kitchen. We had a great day at Scott's yesterday, and we are going to be making some cast iron skillet bread with Rosemary. So I'm going to be able to use my vintage cast iron pan that I got from John at Scott's Antique Market, and I'm really excited to see how it cooks the bread and how it kind of works in the kitchen opposed to some of the newer pans that I've bought. So I'll stick that there and we'll start and get right into the recipe. If the kids aren't in the kitchen with me, Kona is sure to be here right by my side. Okay, so I'm gonna start with 2 cups of lukewarm water, and I'm gonna pour it into my mixing bowl. This one is something from my grandmother's Mix Match collection, and I just love it. And 1 package of this dry active yeast. I'm gonna start with my flour. I personally love using White Lily in my kitchen. It's what we've used for generations. And I'm gonna add it 1 cup at a time to my large mixing bowl. I'm gonna sprinkle in my kosher salt, and I'm gonna stir it with my handy wooden spoon. And I'm just gonna do this 1 cup at a time so that it's completely incorporated into the water and yeast mixture. You're gonna wanna give that a really good stir and mix it nice and neat, folding down all the flour from the sides of your bowl until it's fully incorporated. Here you're gonna wanna keep working the dough, but not overworking it. So continuing to knead it in this kind of a recipe or work with it too much with your hands is going to make the dough tough, and it's gonna make your bread tough in the end. So I've got this rosemary from my garden, and I'm just gonna put a few sprigs in there and really give it that good flavor. All right, so we've got the dough ready. I'm gonna let it prove in the bowl, covered for about 30 minutes to an hour, and then head back out to the garden to get some stuff done. And we'll pop back into the kitchen and get it in the skillet and get it baking. All right, so our bread has sat for 1 hour. You can see it's risen to about double the size. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna lightly flour my hands. And I'm gonna spread a little bit of this flour all over the top of the dough. It's gonna be really sticky, but what we're gonna do here, try not to punch the dough down too much and deflate it, but we're just gonna kind of twist it here, remove it from the bowl, and get a little more flour here. And we're just gonna transfer the dough straight into the pan. So this is my first time cooking with my vintage pan. John said the walls are a little bit thinner. It cooks a little bit more evenly. So I'm really excited to see. I think for the bread, it'll crisp it up really nicely. I did go ahead and preheat my oven too to 400 degrees, so that could be getting hot. So here we go. We're just gonna kind of form it real loosely into a little disc before we set it into the pan. And what I did was I greased the inside of the pan really well so that my bread doesn't stick once it's baking, and we can pop it right out afterwards. It's so pretty. Love the smell of the yeast. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take my knife, I'm gonna make a little X. Cutting the top of the bread is going to help vent the steam a little bit. I'm just going to drizzle a little bit of extra virgin olive oil on the top, kind of spread it around, and that's going to give it that really crispy outside texture while keeping the inside super moist and delicious. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just let this sit. I'm going to cover it for another 30 minutes, let it rise a little bit more. Okay, we just pull the bread out. It looks so delicious. So we cooked it, I would say about 30-45 minutes. You know, I would love to know what other things have been cooked in this pan before me. I know we will be cooking on it for generation after generation. You know, I think it did a really good job. It crisped it right up. I cooked it pretty quickly, and the inside of the pan looks almost brand new. I hope this episode has inspired you to go out there, get your own vintage cast iron pans, make your own homemade bread. It was so easy, it's so much more delicious. But for more recipes and for tips on how to care for and clean your cast iron, be sure to visit us at heirloomedblog.com/cast iron.